People ask, have you ever seen the gods you worship? How can you be sure they exist? Answers, just look around you. I've never seen my soul either, and yet I revere it. That's how I know the gods exist and why I revere them, from having felt their power over and over. Nothing is more pathetic than people who run around in circles, delving into the things that lie beneath, and conducting investigations into the souls of the people around them, never realizing that all you have to do is to be attentive to the power inside you and worship it sincerely. To worship it is to keep it from being muddied with turmoil and becoming aimless and dissatisfied with nature, divine and human. What is divine deserves our respect because it is good. What is human deserves our affection because it is like us. And our pity too sometimes for its inability to tell good from bad, as terrible a blindness as the kind that can't tell white from black. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If the gods exist, then to abandon human beings is not frightening. The gods would never subject you to harm. And if they don't exist, or don't care what happens to us, what would be the point of living in a world without gods or providence? But they do exist, they do care what happens to us, and everything a person needs to avoid real harm they have placid within him. If there were anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure that the ability to avoid it was within you. If it doesn't harm your character, how can it harm your life? Nature would not have overlooked such dangers through failing to recognize them, or because it saw them but was powerless to prevent or correct them. Nor would it ever, through inability or incompetence, make such a mistake as to let good and bad things happen indiscriminately to good and bad alike. But death and life, success and failure, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty, all these happen to good and bad alike, and they are neither noble nor shameful, and hence neither good nor bad. The human soul degrades itself. Above all, when it does its best to become an abscess, a kind of detached growth on the world. To be disgruntled at anything that happens is a kind of secession from nature, which comprises the nature of all things. When it turns its back on another person or sets out to do it harm, as the souls of the angry do. When it is overpowered by pleasure or pain. When it puts on a mask and does or says something artificial or false. When it allows its action and impulse to be without a purpose, to be random and disconnected, even the smallest things ought to be directed toward a goal. But rational beings aim to follow the rule and law of the most ancient of communities and states. Don't ever forget these things. The nature of the world. My nature. How I relate to the world. What proportion of it I make up. That you are part of nature. And no one can prevent you from speaking and acting in harmony with it, always. In comparing sins, the way people do, Theophrastus says that the ones committed out of desire are worse than the ones committed out of anger, which is good philosophy. The angry man seems to turn his back on reason out of a kind of pain and inner convulsion. But the man motivated by desire, who is mastered by pleasure, seems somehow more self-indulgent, less manly in his sins. Theophrastus is right and philosophically sound to say that the sin committed out of pleasure deserves a harsher rebuke than the one committed out of pain. The angry man is more like a victim of wrongdoing, provoked by pain to anger. The other man rushes into wrongdoing on his own, moved to action by desire. We should remember that even nature's inadvertence has its own charm, its own attractiveness. The way loaves of bread split open on top in the oven, the ridges are just byproducts of the baking, and yet pleasing somehow. They rouse our appetite without our knowing why, or how ripe figs begin to burst, and olives on the point of falling. The shadow of decay gives them a peculiar beauty. Stalks of wheat bending under their own weight, the furrowed brow of the lion, flecks of foam on the boar's mouth, and other things. If you look at them in isolation, there's nothing beautiful about them, and yet by supplementing nature, they enrich it and draw us in. And anyone with a feeling for nature, a deeper sensitivity, will find it all gives pleasure, even what seems inadvertent. He'll find the jaws of live animals as beautiful as painted ones or sculptures. He'll look calmly at the distinct beauty of old age in men and women, and at the loveliness of children. And other things like that will call out to him constantly, things unnoticed by others. Things are seen only by those at home with nature and its works.
What is divine is full of providence. Even chance is not divorced from nature, from the interweaving and enfolding of things governed by providence. Everything proceeds from it. And then there is necessity and the needs of the whole world, of which you are a part. Whatever the nature of the whole does, and whatever serves to maintain it, is good for every part of nature. The world is maintained by change in the elements and in the things they compose. That should be enough for you. Treat it as an axiom. Discard your thirst for books so that you won't die in bitterness, but in cheerfulness and truth, grateful to the gods from the bottom of your heart.
It would be wrong for anything to stand between you and attaining goodness, as a rational being and a citizen. Anything at all, the applause of the crowd, high office, wealth, or self-indulgence. All of them might seem to be compatible with it for a while, but suddenly they control us and sweep us away. So make your choice straightforwardly, once and for all, and stick to it. Choose what's best. Best is what benefits me, as a rational being, then follow through. Or just as an animal, then say so and stand your ground without making a show of it. Your ability to control your thoughts, treat it with respect. It's all that protects your mind from false perceptions, false to your nature and that of all rational beings. It's what makes thoughtfulness possible, and affection for other people, and submission to the divine. Forget everything else. Keep hold of this alone and remember it. Each of us lives only now, this brief instant. The rest has been lived already, or is impossible to see. The span we live is small, small as the corner of the earth in which we live it, small as even the greatest renown, passed from mouth to mouth by short-lived stick figures, ignorant alike of themselves and those long dead.